Hello musicians, my name is Simon Powers and this is Classical Guitar Corner. In this video I'm going to be doing a deep dive into Poco Allegretto by Ferdinando Carulli. It's from his method book. This is what it sounds like. It's a lovely piece. It's flowing, it's elegant, and, well, it's really nice and idiomatic to play. So let's dive in. This piece is in the time signature of 3/8. 3/8 is a little less common than 3/4, but the characteristics are just the same. Remember, when we have a time signature, we have a top number, which indicates how many beats in the bar on the measure, and the bottom number, which tells us what kind of beat they are. So in 3/8, we have three eighth notes. Three beats of each of an eighth note. And so you're going to find it's going to count just like 3/4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But instead of a lot of the smaller notes, the smaller durations being eighth notes, you're going to get 1 and 2 and 3 and being 16th notes. So everything's just halved in duration. If there is going to be a characteristic that's a little bit unique to 3/8 compared to 3/4, it's that we sometimes feel this more in 1. Whereas 3/4 can feel a bit more 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, a bit more of a waltz feel. The key signature, 1 flat. So if you want to test yourself, you can pause the video now and try and figure out if you remember what the key signature is with 1 flat. There are often 2 keys associated with this, D minor and F major. But of course, one of the key giveaways is the very first note. Great, that's an F. And the very last note, that's an F major chord, F, A, C. That's an F major triad. So we are squarely in the key of F major. The main thing to remember with that is that we're going to have a lot of B flats rather than B naturals. The rhythm throughout this piece, as you can see, really has 16th notes that go all the way through to various pauses there, halfway through a 16 measure phrase, and then the end of that first section, little pause moments, but for the most part, it's 16th notes throughout. This texture is often called moto perpetuo, so perpetual motion. And what's nice about that is we can really get a great sense of tempo rubato because we can make the music very elastic. For example, the opening measure could be very straight, obviously, 1 and 2 and 3 and 1. But at the beginning of a phrase, we can ease into it by starting a bit slower and speeding up. And equally, we can slow down at different points in the phrase that make sense as well. So it can give this nice elastic lyrical quality to the music. Accompanying that tempo rubato, often we can have some dynamics, so crescendoing into a phrase and decrescendoing out. And then we can do that at many different points. We don't really want to do it too repetitively, in this case 4 measures, 4 measures, 4 measures, 4 measures, because then it becomes a bit repetitive. But we can definitely start playing around with that idea. Perhaps a bit too much, but I'm trying to demonstrate the concept. So that's something we can already do to make the music really come to life. Something interesting about this piece, which is a real window into the peculiarity of classical guitar notation, is that we do get a melody emerging, if we listen to it, out of this texture, but on the page it's not very obvious. Some other pieces might have a very clear melody with all the stems pointing the same direction and the bass notes with the stems pointing down. But here we have a peculiar case of guitar notation where there's very much a melody here, but we have to make sure that we sustain our left-hand fingers and bring out the note in our right hand so that that melody can sing. Notice where I put those strokes. Right, so it's C, C, B, C, C, B, C. That's not implied on the page at all. And this is a question I often get from beginner guitarists, you know, in various forms. How long does a note need to be held down? There's an element of musical understanding, experience with music, that you will just start to understand that that is an implied melody. Because in fact, if we did this, you know, some of them might be an open string where the note extends, but often we have to actually make the effort to keep the finger down to make sure that that melody comes out. Not only that, but we need to bring out the melody with our right hand so that those notes are played a little bit louder, and then suppress the other notes. So out of this single line texture of notes, this modo perpetuo 16th flowing notes, we're actually starting to get a melody emerge. And a bit more clearly even is a bass line. Now here at the beginning, we just get some repeated Fs, but it gets more interesting very soon. Here in the second line, second system, B flat, A, G, E, C. So now we're really starting to find that this music has some dimension to it, rather than just a scale exercise, for example. So if I continued on this idea of melody, perhaps I often call this arts and crafts time, where I color code all the different voices so that it's visually clear what notes belong to what voice. It's not an exact science. Sometimes you might choose, like for example, these C's here at the end that I've marked in red. They actually might be yellow. They might still be a continuation of that middle voice. Sometimes it's a bit debatable. But now with this color coding, it's very pretty, isn't it? Let's have a listen to these voices come out. So we've got melody, melody, accompaniment, bass. Bass. Much more interesting all of a sudden. Now let me play it in time. Great. Carulli, he knew what he was doing. Now, in terms of the right hand, you can see that I have included very specific fingering here. And one thing to take into account, let me see if I can get rid of all of this. Great. One specific thing to take into account is that the bass line here is played with the thumb. Now, this isn't because it's the only way you could play it. You probably could play this passage with I, M, and A. But the thumb has a certain weight to it. It's a bit more pronounced, or it is easier to play it more pronounced than the other fingers. And often with our technique, we want to use our natural inclination to the music's advantage. So if the thumb is a heavy sounding digit, let's use it for one particular voice. Right? So part of right hand fingering as an art really is taking into account what the music needs. And here we have a bass line that has a voice that's emerging. It's becoming active all of a sudden. What I mean by active is it's moving. Remember up in the first system, we just had Fs. So it's not active, it's very passive and static. So as soon as a voice starts moving, it's often nice to bring it out, and it makes the music more interesting. So fingering it with the right hand thumb is going to be helpful there. Speaking of fingering, a question I often get in the editions that I put out is about this use of the fourth finger. Here's another case. Now, there's two reasons here. Let's look at this first measure. Right? We're using the fourth finger on the third fret. Many of you will have had the experience learning the classical guitar where the third fret is played by the third finger in first position. Now, there are two rationales here to use the fourth finger. One is that the very first note, that F, is actually notated as a quarter note to be held because it's part of that bass line. We're establishing that F, which continues on as notated as a quarter note. So it's not just a 16th note, so we're holding it. So that third finger is taken up by that note, which means we have to play the B flat with another finger being the fourth finger. Great. However, we have a rest here. So our third finger is now freed up. So then why on earth would we play that D with a fourth finger rather than the third? The truth is, you can play it with your third finger. No problem. However, in the early stages of development, using the fourth finger really helps to train the hand to stay in a good orientation to the fingerboard. If we use a third finger, the tendency in the beginner stages, and this is rated as a grade 2 piece, the tendency is for the fourth finger to fall off the fingerboard when not being used. And so it's an approach to fingering for beginners that helps remind the hand we want to keep this position where the fingers are over the strings more or less all the time. If you're more advanced as a player, or you feel very confident that your left hand position is stable and you don't fall off the fingerboard, then by all means use the third finger. For example, here in measure 5, it would simply look like this. Completely fine. But a question that often comes up, one of the earliest proponents of this fingering approach was Fernando Sor, who included that fingering in a lot of his editions. All right, so we've talked about this moto perpetuo, we've looked at some of the fingering and some of the voicing. Let's play through the first section now just to get an overview of all of those things in context. Okay, one last interpretation element that I wanted to bring your attention to. Often, as a generic rule, which I'm sure has many exceptions, or I know it has many exceptions, when you have dissonance in especially classical music, which is very, it's relatively obvious when we have clashes of dissonance and then resolutions to consonants. When we have dissonance, we often see accidentals. Sorry, brain froze for a second. Accidentals. It's a dead giveaway that we're going outside of the key. Here we have an F major triad, notes F, A, C. Then we have the F sustain in the bass, and we have a B natural and a G sharp. And it's not particularly important to put on our professor hat and analyze exactly what the harmony is doing here. All that we need to know is it's a bit dissonant. And so to enhance that, to make it more musical, we start with notes that belong in the key, F, A, C. Then we go away, then we come back. And if you apply a very natural and simple dynamic of, let's say, mezzo forte. So we start here, I don't know, just as an example. Piano to mezzo forte and then back to piano. So soft, a bit louder, and back. It really has a nice feel to it. And this can be said of almost, well, again, I'm making broad sweeping generalizations, but almost any dissonances, or if you want to get a bit technical, we call them non-chordal tones in some cases. We tend to lean on them, we tend to accent them, and it makes the return to these, in this case, F major notes, that much more satisfying, especially if we come back with a decrescendo. So let's move on now to the second section. So we've had really 16 measures of this lovely F major passage, and now we're going to get something a little bit contrasting, a little bit different from 17. So let's have a listen. It's only a short contrasting passage, very much in the same texture. I would say the most interesting thing about it is the conversational quality of what's going on in the music. So similar to we pointed out at the beginning, in a similar way, we've got this melody that is not particularly notated. You know, we don't have stems individually marking them out, but we can definitely hear it. And we do have some really clear bass line melodies that are notated with stems, just the idiosyncrasy of classical guitar music. We also have some movement here. So what I would say characterizes this section is there's more movement, particularly in the bass. And there's also an alternation from this high melody moving and then the low bass taking over. So it's very much like a conversation. One person says something, the other person finishes their sentence, which may sometimes be annoying. But so what we can do is accentuate this element, and it will bring out something interesting in the music. So we start at 17. Exaggerating, but sometimes it's good to over-exaggerate in music to make it obvious to the listener. Remember that you might practice a piece for hours, days, weeks, but for most situations, a listener is going to hear it once. So you want to make it really clear from the outset, this is the interesting part of the piece. Can you hear it? So I like to think of being demonstrative, to sort of say, this is the voice. Can you hear it? Make it really push it. So it's obvious on the very first listening. It's often easier to rein things in and make things more subtle than to make them more exaggerated. So I'm constantly telling students at Classical Guitar Corner Academy, louder, more contrast, make things more obvious. Let's play from 17 now all the way to the end. This is quite a slowdown, but you could slow down as we re-enter to the beginning, the material from the beginning. And then you might want to have these chords, PIMA, flesh tone thumb roll, talking about this chord right here at the end. And if you're a beginner guitarist, you'll be shaking your fist at that chord because that's an F major that has a little barre. It's the bane of many guitarists' existence. So I think this is a lovely piece. I've included it in this collection alongside other pieces that Carulli wrote. It's a lovely piece with a set of pieces. As I said, you can download this piece in the collection Easy Classical Guitar Volume 1 and enjoy playing this piece. I hope there was some nice insights in there. If you enjoy my teaching, then you will love Classical Guitar Corner Academy. I've got hundreds of repertoire lessons in there, but more importantly, we teach with the Cornerstone method, which is a step-by-step progressive method that I've been working on for 15 years, designed for adult learners online, and I'm really proud of it. I think it's a great offer to classical guitar pedagogy. So I would encourage you to join the Academy if you're not a member already, and then we can continue our studies. But for now, Thanks for your time, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.